Howdy, everyone. Welcome to Wild Wild Weiss, the community podcast for Calgary Weiss Schwarz. I'm today's host, IgorSquatslav. With me today are PlatPlat and 220. PlatPlat is one of Calgary's more successful players, making it up to top 16 at WGP Nationals in 2019, and 220 won the group stage of the 2020 Weiss Schwarz Timvitational. So, how are y'all doing?
I'm doing well. How are you doing, 220?
I'm doing pretty well, just chilling here.
Yeah, pretty much. Work's a bit busy, but it's the way she goes. Did any of you guys get a chance to watch JP Nationals at all?
I got home because that was the same night as our weekly, so we got home pretty late. And then I just skimmed it just to see what people were doing, and I was like, okay, I'm tired now. And by that time, they were done their match.
Yeah, I just basically just fell asleep as soon as I got home after our weekly, so didn't get to watch any of it. I was pretty tired that day.
Fair enough. I went back and watched a bit of Kilua and Jason's stream where they went over kind of what happened in the top four and nationals in general as well, and did their thoughts on what the upcoming ban list will be. And given how well converted Symphogear and Kaguya were, I think they're probably the ones getting hit.
More than likely. I do think it's spoiler, by the way. I do think it's interesting that the winning list that got in, or the winning player that got in, only got in off of the diversity rule.
Really?
That's what I heard. Can't really verify that, but that's what I heard is they got into their top cut because of diversity.
I'll have to check that, but that'd be really funny.
Mm-hmm. Just a wonderful rule for a competitive card game.
Well, we can't have any more Summer of Zero no Skaimas.
No, I understand, and clearly, clearly the players still played very well and earned their spot, but I have feelings about the rule.
All right. We've got this panel together this week to discuss Weiss jargon and ways that it can be improved. This whole discussion was prompted by a blog post by Zabuton, Ken Takahata, about just what can be called a Riki. The Riki card itself allows you to pay one, clock yourself, and search for a card that is level 1 or lower. The jargon term has loosened such that anything that has an effect that costs 1 stock and 1 clock to give you some sort of benefit will be called by some players as a Riki effect, salvage Rikis, and including things as far-fetched as playing a character from deck to field. And this isn't the only example. Akatsuki effects, money counters, there's a lot. So first off, do you think the expansive use of terms like Riki and Akatsuki have gone too far?
Personally, I'd say yeah. Riki especially is pretty bad, because I'm sure we can find it and put it somewhere, but there's a beautiful alignment chart for Rikis. And the most far off while still being able to be called a Riki is one from Sword Art Online Alicization. When your other character is attacked, pay 1, clock this card to bounce that one back, because you're still getting an advantage. So apparently that's a Riki too. So yeah, I think some of these community names are a little far off, because it's like, with Riki, yeah, that's fair to describe that, Inazuma, or Kaban. Like, those aren't, like, completely unreasonable, because they all do practically the same thing. But, like, you know, when you're describing a a card that goes to memory on reverse pay 1 clock 1 search, it's maybe a bit far off, because it's like, oh, well, now that you've named that, I'm not sure what your timing is. And it's even worse for cards like Krista from Attack on Titan, because they're just completely different timings. So maybe you should only use like a name if it's going to be the exact same thing.
I mean, I feel it's fine as long as like you describe it. If you're like, oh, it's an on death Riki, or it's like it's a salvage Riki, as long as you add like the nuance to it, I think it's generally fine. Just sort of explains what the card does, like the timing of it as well. But if people just like say it's a Riki effect and they just don't explain the timing on it, I disagree with that, because I feel like if you just add in like, once it's setting to waiting room, you can do the Riki effect, or if it's like maybe on reverse, you can pay 1, send it to memory or something and clock yourself 1. Then like you just explain that like on reverse Riki or whatever. Just gotta explain what your card actually does. Just add a little bit more to it. Besides just saying it's a Riki, I think it's fine then.
My question is, how convoluted of an additional description is the absolute limit that you'd be comfortable with to say, okay, that's sufficient nuance to tag the Riki term to it, versus just explain the card and don't use the jargon name?
I think if you add like 3 tags to it, I think that's like too many. If it's like two tops, I think it's fine because like it could be like on death salvage Riki. I think that'd be fine. But if you had to add like a third term after that, then I think it's too much. Just explain the damn card and just don't use the term Riki, because at that point it's just confusing the player more than it's actually explaining the card.
Well, I'm going to push back on that a little because here's the thing. On death salvage Riki or on reverse pay one clock self salvage. Did I actually use more words describing my card or using the jargon?
You know, that's fair. That's a fair point. You basically use the same amount of words to describe the Riki. So maybe it's just like, maybe you tag on one word, and I think that's the max to it then, to make it a more general term for other cards.
Yeah, I mean, personally, for me, if I'm playing in a more competitive environment, I want to ensure that my opponent knows that, or that we're both on the same page, that the card's doing the exact same thing. I don't want any room for misinterpretation, because that can become a pain in the butt later with a judge involvement. Because if you have to go and say, like, ones that drive me nuts are, oh, this is a Riki, and then they will find a card that's not level 1 or lower, and it's like, well, that's not a Riki, you're searching for a trait. That's a completely different effect. Don't use the term Riki, because you're getting me confused now.
Yeah.
So the other problem is, I think if you start adding too many jargon terms for things that aren't entirely clones, it's more confusing for newer players, because then they have to try and decipher, first off, what you mean by calling something a Riki, and then secondly, oh, what do you mean that's not the same thing? It's a problem for some players, like, obviously there are people who pick that up no problem, like you can put two and two together, but I just think for terms of clarity and just keeping the game flowing, it's oftentimes just as easy to name exactly what your card does rather than trying to let them interpret it.
Yeah, and I think on top of just misinterpretations, sometimes I wonder if there's players who think in the jargon terms while they're just working in their heads, and it clouds their gameplay. So it's like, oh, this is a Riki effect. And in their brain, they've shorthanded it to something that's not quite correct. They play out the card, then realize this play doesn't actually work the way I think it will.
Yeah, probably. I mean, I've lent an Excel World deck to a friend, and they misread the card and thought it was just on play, which kind of entirely changes how the deck plays. One that drives me nuts, people calling cards cherries when on death they will discard a card and look at up to top 4 and find a level 1 or higher card. That's not a cherry. That's something completely different. Cherry finds traits. Please don't call it that. That's bad. Don't do that.
Right. And I guess the other thing that just looking through Kilua's list of jargon that he's helpfully put up on his website and into his Google Drive is, I did not realize how many terms there were. Holy.
Yeah, the thing specifically about this list, half of these names wouldn't be used. Like, have you ever heard somebody refer to on play discarded climax to salvage as recording?
No.
No, it's just simply easier to explain your card, because that's a common enough trait that even if your opponent wants to turn off their brain halfway through the explanation, that's not confusing. But calling it recording is pretty confusing there, I'd say, at least.
Yeah, so I guess this also becomes a communication problem when there's uncommon or just weird jargon.
Yeah, there's definitely terms that are popular regionally that don't get used anywhere else.
Do you have an example?
Well, I know for us, we called standby switch for the longest time, and that was confusing for people. But definitely, like, it's not helpful when you're going to a larger tournament where there's people from outside your region, and you start referring to it as one thing, and you're the only group that call it that. It's not very helpful. It's clearly just going to be a force of habit, but I would recommend not doing that.
Kind of funny that we have a piece of regional jargon.
Yeah, that one got dropped off pretty hard after it got clowned, at least more than once.
It got clowned.
Where did it get clowned on?
Yeah, I know at least Kahlua would use like the standby trigger emote from our Discord, because there's only so many. And somebody pointed out, like, why is your emote called Switch? And then that got clowned a little. Yeah, because I'm pretty sure the Japanese slang for it was button because of power button, and that makes sense. And we're like, oh, power switch, but that's, yeah, just standby. Please call it standby.
I was definitely hard on the Switch, and I think I still sometimes call it Switch. So that's me being bad, but it's like it works pretty well because you switch in a character from waiting room.
But you don't have to switch it with another character. Yeah.
Unless you want to.
Yeah, I don't know. The one, if you want people to get really heated, is blue gate, red gate. But I think that might be more of a problem of playing Weiss pre-gate trigger, like
Right.
when there was just comeback.
And I guess before we roll on to the meat and bones of what we're going to be talking about today is, are there any ones that are equally problematic as Riki?
If you want to be like actually hit like the definition of problematic here, maybe stop calling cards suiciders. If you if you want to go, this is a bit of a problem. So people call everything scry in this game, even when it's not look at the top card and put it on top or bottom. That's scry. Look at top card and keep it there or put it to waiting room. That's not scry.
Right.
That's confusing for Magic players because there's in Magic, look at top card and put it to waiting room is called surveil. Now it's a relatively newer term there, so it's not caught on. But please stop calling everything scry. That's not what it is.
Yeah, like just to add on top of that, it's just like when someone tries to explain scry and it's like they put it into the waiting room, I was like, I really thought that was gonna go to like the bottom of your deck.
Yeah,
So
I
like,
didn't think that was leaving your deck. Like that was staying there, right?
yeah, and it's like, even though many Magic players don't use surveil either, just explain the effect if it's not strictly leave it on top or put it in the bottom of your deck.
Right. One that I see a lot is anything that kind of dampens an attack, getting something can't attack, tapping things down gets just called a money counter. And the money counter is, it gives the ability cannot attack. And I've seen people call tap counters anti damage. I've seen people call even like soul downs anti damage. That's one that you really need to explain if it's not just the straight up money counter.
You're gonna love this one. Leaf counter is an anti-damage. I will not elaborate. If you know, you know the Legend of Borden.
I hate this. I hate this so much. All right. So, given that we've set the stage, expansive jargon in Weiss Schwarz is a problem. What is a potential solution? One that PlatPlat has brought to us today is card effect keywords, similar to what they have in Magic the Gathering. PlatPlat, would you be able to introduce the concept, and how could we apply it to Weiss?
Yeah, sure, no problem. I can certainly introduce the concept. So in Magic, there are keywords. Keywords just reply to evergreen effects or always present effects or just effects that end up getting printed a lot. So if it's something that's going to be seen a lot, there's no point putting an entire block of text when you can just bring it down to one word. Now, the difference between Weiss's jargon, like Riki, and a keyword in Magic like Deathtouch is Deathtouch is a mechanic, whereas Riki's just named after a card that does it. So an example that would be more similar to the Weiss jargon in Magic would be Mill. Mill came from the card Millstone, which is tap, and the target player puts the top card of their library into the waiting room. Graveyard. Magic does not have a waiting room. That was called Mill, and pretty much was the entire game's history referred to as Mill. And due to the fact that it's just so commonplace, it is now printed as a keyword in Magic as Mill. And that was more so just the player base being like, this is what we're calling it, and the company going, okay, we're happy with that. In Weiss, they could possibly be doing this. There, at least for a few effects, certainly, where they print the effect in every single set, they could give it a keyword. The best example of this would be just heal. When this character is played, put the top card of your clock into waiting room. That could just be heal.
It's funny because they kind of have one like that in Great Performance. Like, if you look at some of the early Great Performance bodyguard characters, that's all the text there is.
Mm-hmm.
I guess, which abilities other than heal do you think are common enough to be replaced with a one-word keyword? One that I can think of is Mill Runner is just run or sprint or something.
Yeah, I personally I could see that one. My issue though is people use like runners to describe as any character that can run away. So the free runners or center runners, those kinds of things. If you give mill runners the keyword, that would make sense to me. I think it might be a little, at least from a rule standpoint, you might want to leave the other ones alone because it's more clarified what's going on and what conditions need to be met for that.
So like, my question would be, So why not just give it to free runner? Because that just runs regardless, right? And then just add like mill as a keyword and just say mill runner instead.
Right, so we can have compound keywords.
Compound keywords, yeah, that would work for me. Because I was going to mention, like, heal is clarified enough, like, pretty obvious what's going on there. But cards that heal to stock or heal to memory, those kinds of things, you could compound on those. Just explain, like, this heals to stock or this goes to memory, that kind of thing. In Magic, on a lot of cards, unless I think their rule now is some rares and definitely mythic rares, they don't have reminder text. Reminder text is after the keyword is written in brackets, has the rule text. On some of the higher rarity cards, they don't have that reminder text because the idea is that if you're playing with those cards, you probably know what they do.
Mhm.
That's definitely an option for Weiss. My only potential issue I could see with them adopting more keywords than just what they currently have is with Weiss, they want the game to be accessible for everybody, even when it's their first set picking it up. So if you don't have reminder text on at least some of the cards, then players who are new to the game and maybe don't have a full community to play with won't be able to understand what's the card's supposed to do without checking a rule book. And it's not very conducive to an enjoyable play experience your very first time touching a game when you have to sit there reading the rule book the entire time you play.
That seems like something that you would easily just definitely do on your trial deck cards.
Yeah, I think trial deck would be a good way to, you're right. I think trial deck would be a good place to have the keywords with reminder text. I think that commons and uncommons would definitely be a good place to put reminder text because they generally have fewer text on them. Some uncommons definitely have a lot of text, but in general, they have less text. That would be a good place to put reminder text and then maybe on double rares and double R's. Unless the card doesn't have very many other effects, maybe don't put the reminder text just to keep it cleaner.
Right.
So the problem I have with that is that I notice like a lot of like really good effects that are like commonplace that people actually know are usually placed in like double R's or R's in a lot of sets, right? So I feel like a lot of those effects that would want on uncommons and commons to explain these effects generally wouldn't be there in the first place in those rarities. So we wouldn't need to be like actually do that in the first place.
Yeah, that is true. There are some that are making them their way down to at least uncommon. Heal on like uncommon level 3s, and that's all they do. That is a thing. There are some lower rarity brainstormers, but the problem with brainstorm is A, it's already a keyword, and B, you want that to be as clear as possible because there's so many different kinds. Like, probably don't shortcut that because it does have that keyword on it, but then it also has the reminder text so you actually know exactly what it does. And I think that's good.
Yeah. Actually, speaking about the existing keywords that we have in Weiss, what was the last one we got? Was it resonate?
No, Sunder Fusion,
Right.
I think. I'm not sure what English officially went with versus what just the translation was. I think Sunder is what the English set for Gurren Lagann used. I cannot recall what the most recent is because I think they changed it between Gurren Lagann and the next set that had it. I'm not entirely sure, but I think that would be the most recent keyword.
Right. So we don't get them very often.
No, we really don't. They're definitely cautious to add more keywords, but I think that was a good one to add a keyword because it does the same thing.
Mhm. One that I think we see pretty much in every set, and a lot of decks definitely play this, is drop search probably could be a keyword. Like you could probably come up with a keyword name for it and then specify trait.
Yeah, I was going to mention that. I think the other hurdle is they definitely still need to clarify what trait you're searching for or what level, etc., that kind of thing. What you're looking for with these keywords. So if they can find a way to do that, no problem. I think that might be their main reason for not adding more keywords is just, well, we have to explain what it does anyways. Why would we give this a keyword effect if we're going to be printing the entire rules text anyhow?
That's fair, but I think it's definitely a player aid. if there's this official word that is unified for everyone, it's on the darn card. So it's like I'm using a drop search, and it just says drop search or whatever keyword they come up with, like, I don't know, reconnaissance or something.
Yeah, I agree. It's definitely easier for people when they're able to identify from sets that they don't play, don't know anything about. Oh, your card does this? Okay, I now understand what it does. And if there is a keyword to help them get there faster, very nice. Because if you can point at a card on the field and go, is this a brainstormer? And your opponent says yes, you know what you're asking for there.
Yeah.
Because you don't really care if it searches or salvages. You just want the information of what the card does quickly. If you want anything more than that, you're going to ask them.
Yeah. And I think we actually have a really good example in an existing Weiss keyword, shift. Shift in brackets specifies what you can shift, and then has the rules text after it.
Yeah, you are right. That's definitely a good way to execute that. Going back to drop search, whatever keyword they decide to use for that, if they just put in brackets the trait that you're looking for, I think that would be a good way to do that.
Do you think they should just like make it more general so they can also include salvage effects or search effects depending on what it is then? So it'd just be like reconnaissance or whatever, bracket salvage from the waiting room, or rather search your library. Like in brackets for whatever trait.
I'd almost go for 2 keywords.
2 keywords? Okay.
I think 2 keywords would be fine, because I think you actually have to remember, salvage isn't an official term. Any time it's mentioned, it's just the full add a character card from your waiting room to your hand.
I honestly did not know that.
Anytime you interact with the waiting room, it's add a card, remove a card from waiting room. So like ditch and salvage are jargon terms.
Yeah, unless I'm like completely off and there's some niche card where it says salvage. Yeah, at least on the comeback trigger, it says add a character from your waiting room to your hand. Salvage is just an easy way for players to understand where you're getting it from, just like search is. Because if you're saying search, you know where you're looking for. Unless it's like one of 5 tops cards that search your stock. But even then, they clarify that you're searching stock, not library.
Salvage could be the keyword.
I think adding salvage as a keyword would be a good step in the right direction, because there's many cards from levels 0 to 3 that will add cards from your waiting room to your hand, specifically characters. Maybe don't add salvage if it means something otherwise. But even then, you could put in brackets what they're looking to salvage.
Yeah, I'd probably just leave salvage's character and then full rule text if you're trying to grab an event, a climax, or it's conditional.
Yeah, no, that seems reasonable, because there's a lot of level 3s where they'll have like maybe 3 effects, and it'll always say on play from hand to stage, add a character from your waiting room to your hand. I think just salvage as the keyword, and then just what you're looking for.
Yeah, either trait or level.
Yeah, I think that's clear enough.
And what's funny is this actually really cleans up the Riki. Because if you have a keyword for search and a keyword for salvage, you have the cost, search, salvage, you're done. Like, that's way better than what we have.
Yeah, I'd say so. It would just come up to Bushi then to decide what clarify, or what would fall under that, because I think then cards that search for just trait maybe could still fit in there. Cards when they go to memory, maybe leave those separate. But then again, they would still have the memory little block of text before. So that's not even too bad. It's just when it's something like really obtuse, where it's like summon a cost 0 from deck, maybe don't give that effect. Just rules text that one, because that's pretty uncommon. You don't see that very often.
Yeah, no. I guess the interesting one is, would we be able to clean up something like a Kotsky?
If they keep it to the on play, discard a card, check up to 4, add a character, maybe. If you include the ones that are pay 1, send it to waiting room, do that effect, or on sent to waiting room, do that effect, gets a little murkier, maybe not. Because I think those are distinct enough that you might not want to include those.
Yeah, I was just saying that a lot of people use the term pretty liberally. So almost anything that just looks at top four is just considered a Koski for some people, which I don't like. Because sometimes you're looking for like either events, and then some people even call one that like looks at top four and looks for a CX a Koski as well, which I really dislike. Like people just use it way too liberally. So as long as it just sticks to characters and look at top four on play, I think it's fine.
Sorry, 220
Yeah.
is a brainstorm and a Kotsky.
No. No.
You know, it's kind of funny to me that you bring up questions like, is X a brainstorm? Because Bushiroad themselves already has non-traditional brainstorms. Because there's events that will say brainstorm, but it's reveal 3 cards from the top of your deck and put them into your waiting room, and then do this effect. But even going back way further, like Zero no Tsukaima and other sets from around that time, they have brainstorms for 2. You know? So even though they save brainstorm, it still needs that rule text to explain what it's doing.
I wonder if it's a blessing or a curse that Bushy uses keywords so expansively. Because maybe it does give us a lot of flexibility to classify a broad swath of effects. Well, then we get into the same darn problem of, is this a Riki? You know?
Yep. No, I agree. I think brainstorm's fine because that's a specific ability according to the rules, because there's effects where if your opponent uses a brainstorm, do this. I think that's fine because that explains they're using this effect.
Yeah, no, I can jive with that. I guess like the thing with money counter anti-damage is, would you want to see just an event that has event, keyword, and nothing else?
I mean,
Personally, no. Put at that point, if it does one thing, leave it on there. Unless it's like specifically for a card where they're like, I want this to be as full as art as possible. Because the fun part between cards coming from Japanese to English is them just making the rule box longer. The level 3 Kurumi finisher from Data Live's pretty good. The the text box got longer, so it encroaches on her face more. But otherwise, I don't know. I think at that point there's no point. Leave events alone, maybe. Unless it's like the year is 2025. Every single set has an anti-damage event, and they all do the same thing. Sure, why not? I guess.
yeah, a lot of the examples people calling things like anti-damage or money counter really should be like other things like called tap counters or gives like neg soul, because money counter makes it so the character can't actually deal damage, right? Which
Yeah.
is relevant. And sometimes like, oh, maybe it gives minus soul, right? Instead, which is like you can still swing over. Some people can swing for 4 soul, right? So maybe you'll still get 1 damage in. Whereas like money counter guarantees that regardless of any other effects the card has, it just does 0 damage.
I'm going to be honest. I don't know who these people you're talking about are. I haven't encountered that one too bad. People are usually pretty clear that this is a rest counter or this gives negative soul. I haven't at least personally had that problem. Maybe it is a thing.
Like when I was in Ontario when I was playing a bit, I heard people call like just things tap counters or sorry money counter when it was just minus soul across.
I think that's simply then just a example of the player being straight up wrong about what the effect does. But I
That's
don't
fair.
know.
That's fair. I guess the other thing is talking about another card that has a keyword on it, and actually a keyword that I like. The backup keyword is great.
Yeah, I agree. Backup good because it
Yeah, backup's good.
Yeah. Do you think we could standardize some of the additional backup effects that are pretty common?
I definitely think Leaf counter.
Things like leaf counters, anti-change counters.
I Addy change is a little harder.
yeah, but any change is a little hard because there's bottom decks, waiting rooms, that kind of thing. Also, just the cost being different on them makes a difference to some players.
Right. That's fair.
But
That's fair.
I think things like the Leafa counter, trying to find the official name here. Yeah, I'm not going to find it. Oh, there we go. Leafa gathering materials, that card. Personally, I think it'd be funny if they just borrowed the magic term and used loot. Except that's not the same thing because looting is drawing and then ditching. But I don't know. Maybe find something because it's just reveal top card. If it's trait, add it to your hand and then discard a card. I don't know. Maybe I could see that being a keyword because most sets these days have that effect.
And I think giving extra power if you're using the backup on proper traded character is pretty common too.
Yeah, just a standard 2K backup. I think that could be definitely shortened to something else.
I think that's simply just a relic of game design because they don't care about standard anymore. Let's not pretend like they do. They're just doing that for the 5 people out there that do play standard. I think it's a good format. Well, that's a different topic, but I think that's simply just a relic of game design where, we have to ensure that this only works with the correct traded cards. It's less common these days, but there are some sets still where they will have a second trait in this series that doesn't mix well, and they want to keep that separate. That's fine to me. But I don't know that you would want to shorthand that. It is confusing to new players where it's like, oh, this is a 1,000 power backup. Okay, if all my characters are this, I get an additional 1,000, and they're looking at that like, well, that's pretty obvious now, isn't it? There's no other traits in the set. Why would you need to have that? Why can't it just be a 2,000 power backup in the first place?
But no, those guys who play standard on YouTube. Yeah, so who are our standard bros?
Oh no, the name's in Japanese. The Twitter ID for at least one of the users is Alice_Dogma. I think you can find a link to their YouTube channel on their Twitter page there.
Okay.
Very cool. They play a lot of standard. In fact, if you saw the Doctor Strange card from Marvel revealed recently, and you're like, I'm sure in standard that could be an instant win, but I don't play that format and I don't know anything. Well, he's solved the deck. I'm sure he had help because he has a community there that actually plays standard. But yeah, they've solved Doctor Strange as a win con in standard, so that's cool. Go check them out.
Yeah, so now that we're talking about Doctor Strange and standard, I think we've probably got most of what we wanted to talk about out of the way. I guess jokingly, Doctor Strange keyword when.
When there's more alternative win cons in Weiss than one every 5 years, because I think there's some other ones, maybe. Definitely not any that aren't in Woozer that I'm thinking of. But yeah,
We have some alternative lose conditions.
Oh, you're right. We do have alternative lose conditions. Yeah, let's get
We do?
keywords for those because those are so common.
Based Ifrit and based Wig Slayer.
Oh my god. I'm not sure that's. I think that's just player misplaying if they're losing with those cards.
Especially Wing Slayer. But
Yeah.
well, that about wraps us up. So the final question, yay or nay, should there be more keywords in Weiss Schwarz to help clean up jargon?
I would think so. I mean, a lot of cards are very commonplace nowadays, and it'd just be nice to know what the card does exactly as soon as someone just explains or says the jargon or the keyword. So I do think there should be more keywords in Weiss.
For me, I'd say yes with an asterisk. The asterisk being keep it simple. Maybe don't just add a bunch of keywords that didn't really contribute anything.
Perfect. And that wraps us up for today. We hope you enjoyed listening us to talk about Weiss Schwarz jargon and how to clean it up with keywords. If you did, make sure to subscribe to our podcast on Spotify, iTunes, and Google Podcasts. Search Weiss. If you want to check out our written work, head on over to wildwildweiss.wordpress.com. Follow us over on Twitter at wildwildweiss. Join us on Twitch for some live action, Weiss, or check out the Calgary Weiss Schwarz community on Facebook or Discord. Do you guys have anything else you want to plug before we sign off here?
I think I'm okay.
Yeah, check out Wild Wild Weiss. Check out Alice Dogma. He features a lot of interesting standard gameplay. It's all in Japanese, unfortunately, but if you are willing to look into the cards a little, it's pretty funny stuff. Standard is a cool format. Probably a bit late for it to be a thing now, but one can dream, right?
One can dream. I'm hoping to run an episode more before the end of the year, so we hope we'll stick around for that as well. So until next time, this has been IgorSquatslav.
This has been PlatPlat.
It's been 220.
And I hope to see y'all next time.